Identifying your own why and your intrinsic motivations is not something many snow sports instructors take the time to reflect upon. And yet, if you ask many high level examiners and national team members how they persevered through the highs and lows of their journey, it often comes down to staying true to their own core values and remembering why they set off on this journey in the first place. Philip Schwartz joins us in this Tech Talk for discussion on finding your true north, why your why matters. Besides being a member of the PSIA Eastern Regions Development Team, Philip has a background in writing and journalism and is now head of communications and public relations for a hospital system in New York. As you may notice, it's a background that has certainly influenced the many points and stories he shares throughout the presentation. I hope you enjoy this episode of Okemo Tech Talks.
If you're going to boil this down, it's really about intrinsic motivation and what I'm calling our personal true north. And quick definitions, intrinsic motivation comes from within. We're talking about personal satisfaction, enjoyment. Extrinsic motivation is about external rewards, avoiding negative outcomes. Um, and some of this is in our reading and in our PSA manuals. By way of example, intrinsic motivation could be driven by curiosity. Extrinsic motivation could be driven by status seeking. I'll just leave it there for definitions. And it's important to note that we're driven by both. We're all driven by both. But the research really shows that intrinsic motivation leads to better results, especially in creative pursuits or in learning and in long-term engagement. Um, as an aside, I've attended a lot of these tech talks over the summer and last spring too. It's great to see the engagement from the Okemo staff, the Vail Resort staff. And I think it's safe to say if you're logging into a ski talk on a Tuesday night in September, I think you've got the intrinsic motivation covered, right? So kudos to everyone here for just investing in your personal growth. And I give you a lot of credit for that. My goal tonight is to just add to this tech talk conversation, share some ideas, share some of my personal experience. It's not an academic talk. It's not a 5 steps to a better you program. I'm here to just spark some reflection. And for me, the spark for this talk really centered around some challenges I faced before dev team tryouts last season. Nothing out of the ordinary. I got sick. I got injured at one point. And, listen, I know that others face much bigger tests in their journeys. But challenges, they happen to everyone. Early last season, I felt like I stumbled onto something that helped me. I came up with a simple exercise that led me to formally define my true north, my why. And I'll explain more as we go on tonight. But basically, I created a personal mission statement that defined it was a mission statement and 5 core values. And the 5 core values became safety, integrity, compassion, excellence, and stewardship, with the latter being just being a good ambassador to the sport. And I didn't reinvent the wheel here. I pulled these from my core values in my work in healthcare. But as you'll see later, I tailored them to my ski life. Um, 100% transparency here. I was a little reluctant to talk about this. For one, I don't want it to be all about me. I went and I sought the counsel of others about this, and they encouraged me to share it and repurpose it into a Snow Pro article. Because the thought is that my experience can be a window into what you may be experiencing. Um, so, I was also reluctant about this mission statement talk, because of how I see skiing. And, I see an emotional power and joy in skiing. And my connection to it, frankly, is a bit mysterious. I can't really explain that connection. And, you're welcome to roll your eyes here. But if you're on this talk, I'm sure you can relate to that. So in context to how I feel about the sport, it seemed a little incongruent to create a corporate style mission statement and core values. And so that kind of explains my reluctance. All that said, and this is where I speak out of the other side of my mouth, I found that, codifying my mission getting it down on paper, codifying my core values as a skier, as a ski instructor and a trainer, I felt it helped me. And with this mission on paper, it's something that I regularly revisit to remind myself why I do what I do. And for the record, it's not literally on paper. It's in a Google Doc. It's on my phone, so I pull it up when I need it. So at the heart of the talk tonight, I just want to get together, tell that story with the thought that you could hear it and perhaps take something of it. Um, and to get closer to the core, the question really that I would like us to be asking tonight is, what are we tapping into for motivation? Is there something we could be doing individually and collectively to sustain us? Do we need do we need to tell ourselves a new kind of story in a deliberate way? Quinn Ferguson, we both made dev team tonight. I think he's on the call tonight. He was here a month or so ago, and he spoke on the subject of self-talk. And we didn't plan this as a companion piece, but you can make the argument that you could put these talks together. Quinn focusing on performance-minded self-talk, and tonight I'm kind of zooming out a bit to focus on your own personal broader story and tapping into that story as a way to motivate you. If you didn't catch Quinn's talk, as Brandon said, they're all on YouTube. You can check it out. So, as a staff trainer and a dev team member, I'm concerned about retention. I'm concerned about ensuring our talent as an industry gets deeper and continues to get better and doesn't just exit stage right and go out and buy an epic pass, right? Because we got to face it, our schools are competing for talent with relatively cheap season passes. So that's where all this matters. And I've also envisioned this talk as a series of stories. Some great thinkers, economists, novelists, what have you, they see power in stories, and I subscribe to this belief. I just subscribe to the belief that individuals and broader cultures are built on stories and the stories they tell themselves. Then these narratives help define who we are. And if we're going to find our true north, we're going to have to listen more closely to our own stories. Okay, so if you're going to tell stories, you need a table of contents. I want to root this in the learning connection model. In chapter 2, we're going to go deeper into your why and why it matters. Chapter 3, these are all short chapters too. The Wright brothers are going to teach us about status versus meaning. Mr. Rockefeller wants to meet you in chapter 4. I'll expand on who this Philip guy is anyway. We'll talk about skiing as a metaphor. I'll tell you a story about my son's piano teacher. Then Philip gets COVID in chapter 8 and crashes, but only metaphorically. And then a few months later, Philip crashes literally. And then we'll talk about boats in chapter 10. So this is what the next 30 minutes of your life will look like. So where do we put this into the learning connection model? A lot of this, to me, just resonates with the people skills triangle. I'd argue that tapping into your why helps you be more authentic and therefore more trustworthy. Develop relationships based on trust. This is the foundation of what we do. It's one of our people skills fundamental. And tapping more deeply into your why simply helps you know yourself better and your motivations. It helps you recognize and regulate your own emotions. Allows you to know yourself better and therefore better able to recognize and influence the emotions of others. So I'm deliberately pulling from some of the language in PSA surrounding people skills fundamentals here. Okay, so why your why matters. And what do I mean by why? Most of us in the East are part-timers, so we must have a why, right? Because we all know the drill, we know the demands. There's something in us that must be driving us just get out of bed on an early Saturday morning after a long week at another job and go to a second job, right? I mean, sometimes it would be nice to have that second cup of coffee in the morning. And in some ways, what we do as these part-timers doesn't make any rational sense, right? And I'd argue without a deeper why, we lose motivation. Um, and some more reasons, on this slide about why that why matters. And this comes from a variety of sources. We're more fulfilled when in service of something bigger. We're more resilient when times get tough. A stronger why means a stronger sense of community and belonging. It leads us to be more joyous, I'd argue. And if we're more joyous, we attract people to join in. And that's whether it's about retaining instructors or whether we're growing the sport or get people to come back for return lessons. Um, and you might know this guy, Simon Sinek. He did a bunch of TED Talks. One of them went viral about 15 years ago. He's an author, he's a lecturer. In his work, he emphasizes the power of purpose and how core beliefs drive our actions. In his talk, he repeats this phrase. He says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. But most of us communicate by saying what we do, then how we do it. But rarely do we even get to the why. We certainly don't start with why. But the why is really the core purpose behind our work. And I'm guilty of this too. You ride in the chairlift with me. It's like, hi, I'm Philip. I teach skiing at Maple, Ski Ridge, and Gore Mountain. I'm devoted to my sport. I train all year round. It makes me a better ski instructor. Come ski with me. But what if I put the why first? And this might sound a little weird on a chairlift, but how about I believe in the power of skiing to change lives in big ways and small. As we progress through the sport, we unlock more and more possibilities on the mountain. We open ourselves to a vast array of adventures. So, putting the why, the deeper why first. And I'm not saying that we really, you know, have to go around talking like this, but I'm just asking us to consider exploring this mental shift to consider a deeper why. So people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Um, and here's a story, I just picked up from Simon's Tech Talk, and it's a lesson in status seeking. And tell me if you see any parallels in this story when it comes to how we might approach certification as PSIA members, right? So the story is about the Wright brothers. They famously achieved their first flight. The time was December 1903. The place, Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Now, at the same time, there's this guy, Samuel Pierpont Langley, who's also trying to do the same thing as the Wright brothers. And there was something of a race going on at the time, and they weren't the only two groups doing this. But Samuel Pierpont Langley was probably like the best positioned. He had funding from the US government, he had Ivy League connections, he was a Harvard guy, he had the best talent money could buy. The New York Times was really interested in him. They were following him around everywhere and reporting on every move. He was the people's favorite in this race, and everyone was polling for him. And meanwhile, not far away, you had the Wright brothers. No funding, no press, no formal education. Not a single person on their team had a college degree. Now, what they did have was purpose. They had a belief that if they succeeded, they could change the world. This vision, this why, inspired the team around them. They weren't working for the paycheck, and the team was invested in the vision. And then you had Langley on the other hand, and he was in it for fame and fortune. And this part is telling. When the Wright brothers succeeded, Samuel Pierpont Langley, he quit. So instead of building on their success, he walked away because he wasn't first. He didn't get rich, he didn't get famous. So in his mind, why bother? Um, and his why was money and fame. The Wright brothers' why was transformative, and it was to serve a broader purpose. So this is, I'm giving you kind of like the retelling of Simon Sinek's version of the story, and there's some historical nuance here, right? But it's a great anecdote about status. And in our world as instructors, we have status, right? I mean, we have the status comes in bronze pins and silver pins and gold pins, right? Um, and status isn't a bad thing, right? When you level up and you put that new pin on your parka, I mean, it feels good, right? Your colleagues notice, they pat you on the back. They give you hugs. It's well deserved. And it's a well deserved symbol of your achievement. It's a well deserved symbol of your hard work. You're professional. You're expanding body of knowledge, and these are all good things. And there's a reason why it feels so good when you get there. But I got news. The status wears off really quickly if there isn't something more behind it. I have a friend. We talk about this kind of stuff a lot. I asked him if it was okay if I mentioned this tonight, and he said it was okay as long as I didn't give away any details that would identify him. This is personal to him. So my friend, he's this hardworking guy who's super talented, but career-wise, he just couldn't get a breakthrough. And he went on for years and years. And then in his 40s, he got this big break. He lands, a big new job, and with it comes status. And it's status in his industry, and he's making good money for the first time. He has a voice professionally. People were seeking his opinion. He has clout. So my friend even tells the story of taking his wife to like this fancy banquet for work at this beautiful hotel. And shortly after he got there, someone approached him and said, Mr. Rockefeller really wants to meet you. Would you mind coming with me? And his wife is like, who are you? Like, who did you suddenly become? And I had to change the name Rockefeller here because I didn't want to give anything away. But it's a name everybody would know, or a lot of people would know. In any event, my friend said he ultimately didn't love the job. His heart wasn't in it. And while the status was intoxicating at first, it took about a year before it wore off, right? So again, status wears off really quickly if there isn't something more behind it. So, I ask you to just go back and think about how this might, translate to the process that we go through for our own certification goals, right? So, um, I got ahead of myself a little bit early there. Typically you start a presentation with your bio. This comes from the chapter of saying that stories don't always have to be linear. Um, to understand my perspective tonight, I want to share what I value. And as I said earlier, I see skiing as a creative outlet. I see it like a dance. It's about joy, it's about passion, it's about a search for grace. And I'm just unapologetic about that. Even if some people might roll their eyes. You know, uh, and I also care deeply about lowering barriers to entry of the sport. How can we reduce costs and how can we make it easier for families? And that's a key driver to my dedication to Maple Ski Ridge. At Gore, there's a program with local schools. It subsidizes lift tickets and lessons. And the kids and families in the program may not be able to afford to ski other ways. So I raise my hand for those assignments, right? Um, and these are the things that are important to me. And I'm interested in exploring more what I can do to live up to those values. And for me, the great thing about making Dev Team is that it's another step up on a platform that I can shout from and maybe even have some influence. So that's my true north. And if you look back at where I came from, you might be able to see my why. I grew up 40 miles north of Manhattan, family of 5 kids. We didn't have a lot of money, not exactly fertile ground to produce skiers. My father hunted for deals on equipment and lift tickets. The best deals that we had were these $2 promo tickets from Potter Brothers ski shops. And I'll let that sink in for a second, right? $2 lift tickets. And this was the 1980s and not the 1880s, right? So, and we maybe skied 12 days a year, mostly on $2 lift tickets, 15 days if we were lucky. And I loved every aspect of it. Some of my best memories are, 5 kids in the car, maybe a friend or two piled into the family station wagon. We're heading to Jiminy Peak for night skiing or to Plattekill or to Catamount. Those were my stomping grounds as a kid. And then, you have these, dark drive homes on, January nights, falling asleep and listening to my parents in the front seat. I'd fantasize about equipment. I drool over ski magazines, and I couldn't get enough. And 12 to 15 days a year weren't enough. So, all of this pointed me to ski teaching. Um, and as an aside, my first job ski instructing was as a senior in high school at Catamount. And Brian Dolan, who's an examiner now, hired me. So just a shout out to Brian Dolan. Um, and so, and I'm kind of hinting at this, but a lot of this centers around my father. He passed away, natural causes at the age of 87, almost 6 years ago to the day. In fact, September 19th. It's kind of funny. I decided to add this to this talk last week, and as I was making my notes, I looked down at the date, and it was September 19th, and I hadn't realized the significance. So I mentioned this because, all of it, globally for me is wrapped around my father somehow. And, to the point where I can feel him in some mysterious way, every time I step into a ski binding. So when you talk about my why, when you talk about true north, this is mine. So it was never about skiing. Um, there always has to be something more. So my ask of you is just to reflect on your own ski history and how you got here. Keep those memories close to your why. Call them back up when you need them to help push you forward into the future. Um, okay, so if it's not about skiing, if skiing is a metaphor for something larger, we'll do a little brainstorming session here. And I want you to throw into chat or come off mute and you can just shout it out. What skiing is a metaphor for? Substance behind the parka. Okay, good. Flying, freedom. Yeah, and I populated this screen, so I put in community. Skiing is life. Silly but true. I like it. Thanks, Richard. Being indestructible. Nice. To dance with the mountain. Yeah. Community and camaraderie. Yep. Expression. Yeah, I like that, Quinn. I put in possibility, nature, family. Yeah, Warren. Hey, Chef Warren, how you doing from Gore Mountain? Um, something you do by yourself or with friends. Yeah, I ski a lot alone, actually. Social connections, purpose, never-ending pursuit of improving. That's something for sure, Brandon. First time I'm creating more beauty. Yeah. Okay, so creativity, beauty, recentering, life changes, uncertainty, beauty in motion, artistry, grace, cooperation, friendship, achievement, recharging, accepting what is out of your control, sanity, right? Yeah, it's a way to get our sanity. Yeah, and always trying to get better and never stop seeking the perfect turn. Perfect. Yeah, yeah. You make 10 turns and maybe one or two of them feel good, and it's like chasing the dragon. Um, so yeah, and exploring the unknown. Great. Yeah. So just keep them coming. Personal challenge, beauty of nature, venue to always improve, friends and places and travel. Thanks, Alona. Good to see you here. Yeah, and I put that accepting what is out of our control as the last one. I just love that one. And I guess it just means something to me. Um, so, um, you know, here I'm just going here. So, if it's bigger than skiing, you have your why, and we see in the chat a lot of people just throwing in their ideas. They have their why, and that why is something to draw from. So, looking at skiing as a metaphor is a way to continually remind ourselves that what we do is special and it transcends sport. And this is an exceedingly simple exercise, but I'm just trying to provide a prompt to get you thinking about your values. And if you're looking for your why, this is a great place to start. And showing this version up, this slide up again, I just want to circle back and underscore why matters. It gives you a sense of service and purpose. It makes you more resilient when times are tough. And, this is a good segue to uh, an important point that I should acknowledge, and what we do can be tough. Think about the ski season. By President's Day in February, the season, starts to feel pretty long, right? And at the same time, it feels too short, especially if you're training for certification. You might feel as if you're not getting enough free skiing as you train. Maybe you're not getting the right type of free skiing as you train, not enough steeps or bumps or whatever. Um, and here in the East, like I said, many of us are balancing these demanding jobs with a second job in skiing. There's travel, there's training, responsibilities at home, relationships with, parents, children, partners, other demands at home. Maybe your basement's flooding, there are injuries. There's the demands of keeping in shape. So, it all adds up. So we got a lot on our plates, be sure as you head into this season and through this season, treat yourselves right, give yourself some compassion and grace, and extend that to your colleagues too. So I've got a story on the subject of it's not always going to be rosy. And I'm building up to a story about a piano teacher and kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down, and thumbs neutral approach. And I want you to think back to last season here in the East. Do you remember the weather like mid-January? I found myself leading a weekend clinic at Gore after we suffered a bunch of rain during the week. The mountain was brown, the snow was mush. It was probably like 45 degrees on this day, fog eating the snow, more rain in the forecast, so it's not exactly inspiring, and on top of that rotten weather, I'm kind of feeling tired and worn out a bit. And so it's the first run of the day. And I started the clinic just being 100% transparent. I said, I'm happy to be leading you today, but to be honest, the weather's got me down. So, I gave this group of instructors, my colleagues, permission to express a range of feelings. I asked them, where are you? Are you here? Thumbs up. Are you here? Or are you kind of neutral? Um, and I got this from a guy named Mark Merritt, and he's a family friend. He was my son's piano teacher before my son took up guitar. And Mark started each lesson asking whether my son was thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs neutral. And it's a quick and easy way for him to gauge his student's state of mind as he begins and he goes into the lesson with that with his student's state of mind, in mind, and maybe he tailors the lesson to that mood. So Mark, his approach goes deeper than just gauging the mood of his student. Um, his message is, you're not always going to be riding a big happy wave. There's times when you're just not going to be feeling it. Uh, and Mark, he rightly wants music to be part of my son's life for his entire life. And, if we're going to have lifelong love, whether it's skiing or music, there are going to be times when it's tough, when we lack the motivation, when we're not feeling, when we're just not feeling it, So, and I love that Mark acknowledges this, embraces it. He gives his students permission not to be enthralled 100% of the time, because that's not reality. And I think it speaks volume about character when you do the thing, even during times when you don't necessarily want to be doing the thing. So here's another way that says that it can be a slog and that it's not always going to be transcendent. This was a recent cartoon from the New Yorker that is both funny and I thought it was fitting for tonight. So I'll read the caption here. Realizing that not every moment in life will be deep or meaningful or vibrating with energy that would give him the fulfillment that he'd always hoped for. Todd unloaded the dishwasher. So, in terms of the January clinic I was talking about, I should note that, I was transparent when we started. I said, yeah, I'm happy to be here, but I'm kind of thumbs down today. And if I read the group correctly, I think they appreciated the transparency. And then a funny thing happened. Throughout the clinic, we were just having a lot of fun. And I kept calling back to, up, down, neutral. Uh, and then, I kept on kind of churning mine up, like, slowly, like an old fashioned volume dial, like up to 11, let's crank up the fun. And so the bottom line here is that in any talk of intrinsic motivation, there's got to be an acknowledgement that things can be tough. Sloggy is the word that I'm thinking of, and I don't even know if that's a word, but that you're not always going to want to do the thing, and that's okay. Um, and, and and there's something in this acknowledgement, in the transparency, that eases the tension, and the more transcendent moments, they'll come. So here's a story of my less than transcendent moment myself. And here I'll transition to talk more about my mission statement and the core values that I mentioned earlier. And I'm going to tell you how this all came about. And the story is this, going into the season, I knew I was taking on a lot, including a run at dev team. It's worth mentioning that I had returned to Gore, rejoining the school after 20 years away. So I was making adjustments. There were some people I knew from the past and a lot of people I didn't. So I was meeting new people. My work schedule, my real job, I work a pretty demanding full-time job Monday through Friday. It has some flexibility to allow me to do this, but it's demanding, and so a typical week, would have me ending work Friday, and leaving work and driving over to Maple Ski Ridge to teach a lesson or two, and then leading a staff training clinic. Saturdays at Maple are nonstop. We're on snow. Or we arrive at 7:30. We're on snow from 8 to 4. It's kind of a scarf down a Laura bar for lunch kind of schedule. It's that kind of busy. And then Sundays, I'm up at Gore, and it's the same thing. And then Mondays, I go to my professional job, and after work, I volunteer as a chaperone for my son's ski club at West Mountain. And then as a last bit, last year was a full PSA event schedule, training clinics, and that was part of my dev team training. So, there were weeks when I'd be leaving West Mountain late on a Monday night and driving 4 hours to New Hampshire for a Tuesday morning clinic. And I share this knowing that you too, have these crazy work weeks like this in the winter. And the bottom line, in my case, I knew I was going into the season, I was going to be busy. But then, before the season even got into full swing, my wife and I, we get COVID over the holidays, and it just frankly kicks our butts. The primary symptom was just incredible fatigue. And I'm sure you all can relate to this. But this was a fatigue like on a level of existential crisis, right? Like, will I ever have the energy, the motivation to get off the couch? I mean, it was that kind of fatigue, right? So I missed like 5 ski days, which to me was really important training time. I missed work at both Maple and Gore. Then the first week of January comes, and it's the first full weekend of this crazy schedule. And it was really the first full test. And COVID's not helping, right? So in my head, I had this question on a continuous loop. Would I be able to handle this? You know, and the first weekend I was just utterly exhausted. And then to top it off, I had just a really bad training session at Gore that Sunday, and that didn't help, right? So by that Monday, I just felt defeated, and part of it was the COVID talking. But nonetheless, there's that question on the loop, would I be able to handle this? Can I make these commitments? So after that weekend, to say I was down was an understatement. At lunch that Monday, dawned on me, a little exercise came to mind, and it was, sit down, write all the negative things you're feeling right now, then write down all the positive things you're feeling. And I still have the files, and I'm going to share some highlights and lowlights. And this is me getting a little vulnerable, but I labeled this diary for Monday, January 8th, 2024, state of things, coming off COVID, which made me homebound December 23rd to January 1st, struggling mentally as I recover my energy. And then there's a subhead, negative thoughts coming to me right now. Will I have the energy? Will I be able to free ski enough to train? Will I have the bandwidth between Gore and Maple? Then what happens if I make dev team? What if I don't like the job? And by the way, those were fleeting thoughts because I'm really looking forward to this coming season. And then there was like, is this all I'm made of? Could I be this easily knocked off my game? Am I neglecting my family? What about skiing with my wife and the kids? What if I leave my family behind in this pursuit? Um, there was more than this, but you get the idea. And as an aside, my family was just amazingly supportive. And I think they'll tell you that you can balance dev team with family life. So I don't want to scare anyone off. Check in with me next year, for an update. So okay, so I had my negative list down. Then I make a second list, and there's positive thoughts coming to me right now. I have to focus on what's in my control, and we'll talk about control in a minute. And that's where we're going to end at control. There are so many people who want me to succeed, and they want to help me get there. I'm going to just give myself a break as I'm adjusting to new commitments and responsibilities. It is way too early to make the call in the future. I need to stay in the present. Damn it, it's just skiing. Keep it in perspective, dude. I'm feeling this way because I care deeply. You can adjust at any point in time. If you wanted to, you can walk away at any time. You have the free will. Another note on control. And then lastly, it was like the weather is contributing to your outlook. It was a bad January, So, and December for that matter. So, after I drew up these lists, I had a little flash of light. I said to myself, you should write up a mission statement, write up a set of core values for yourself. And as I said, I was kind of reluctant to share this. Sharing my core values makes me feel a little bit like a teacher's pet, and I actually talked about this reluctance with some people I trust, and even reached us a couple of weeks ago, and I suggested that I even take this part out, and they said, "No, you got to keep this part in. It's like the heart of it." So before I advance the slide, I'll note that somewhere in my notes from that day in January, I had this telling sentence, and I wrote that words matter. Words can change the world, even in small ways. So from the Words Matter department, here's my mission. To inspire skiers and my industry colleagues to find joy and seek transformational change in their lives through snow sports and mountain adventure. And what I did for this presentation was just highlight in yellow the words that match kind of the skiing as metaphor exercise, and maybe not word for word, but thematically. And then values, safety. Nothing else is possible unless safety is first. And from the context of everything we're talking about today, I can't stress this one enough, and how safety should include your own well-being, and that has to come first. In my own level 3 and dev team training, I had to prioritize rest and energy, integrity, and transparent in all my words and actions, respect all confidences, and treat all with dignity and respect. Compassion, I demonstrate empathy toward my students and Snowsports colleagues. I reinforce that I care for them as individuals and strive to give them individual attention. And I feel like the integrity and compassion piece go back to striving for authenticity and how that builds trust. So excellence, I provide superior service to all I encounter. I ski, speak, and demonstrate with precision. I continue to push my boundaries and develop my skills and knowledge at a superior level to assure excellence in all I do. I express creativity, artistry, and passion through my actions and my movements. I see skiing as a search for grace. Stewardship, I'm an ambassador to my sport and work to break down barriers of entry to the sport. I follow core values, spread joy, provide inspiration, recognizing that such actions can have a profound, beautiful, mysterious butterfly effect. So, do I live up to this mission? Do I live up to these values? No, not every day. Maybe on my best days, but they're aspirational, and I found them to be, for me, inspirational. Now, for you, you want to copy and paste these ideas? I say go for it. But more likely, you're going to have your own ways to tackle this topic, and it should be deliberate. It should be yours. It should be personal to you. And again, I'm just looking to start the conversation and hopefully start a process of reflection. Um, and I'll say that later in the season, I got injured, and when you're training for CERT or tryout, this could be devastating. You hear stories of someone getting hurt right before, say a national team tryout. And when a tryout like that is once every 4 years, it's a serious blow. And it's something we have to learn how to manage. And I'm not going to go great detail here, but having something like these core values as a foundation and in baking them into my mental outlook, it helped me navigate mentally, through this injury. And in the end, what really helped um, was the recognition that it wasn't about the trophy, that this journey was in service to something bigger, and that I was a better teacher and leader and skier because of it, and that mattered. And I know that's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason because there's some universal truth to it. Okay, so I'm not going to linger long here, but I'd like to mention two other things that got me through the injury, and one was the recognition that I wasn't alone, and we're never alone. Sometimes we have to make the difficult decision though to step up and reach out for help. In my case, there were a lot of people I leaned on, both within skiing and outside my ski life, and they helped me to quickly recover from this injury and ultimately get me to the tryouts because it wasn't a foregone conclusion. And then the other thing that helped me get through this was about control, which I keep on alluding to. I got injured; it was actually 100% out of my control. But what I could control from there was doing my best to take care of both my body and my mind. I had 15 days to do it, so I had to get down to work. So, three pillars, three C's of intrinsic motivation. On that subject, control is one of the three pillars of what I call the three C's. These can be written in a different way too. I came up actually, my wife came up with three C's. There's a story about that, but that's something else. Competence, you have to have the skill and the desire to improve, or you're seeing progress, gaining that skill. Community, you have the support systems and all the good that comes with those and sharing this experience and this journey. And you could put purpose under this umbrella of community as well. And then lastly, you have control, which is, you have agency and you have autonomy over your fate. Um, so this transitions to my last story, and it's on control. Um, and I look at this as a paradox, but the more the more, well, let's put it this way: you gain more control when you give up control. So bear with me here. The story of Charlie Jones is going to illustrate that. I don't remember where I first heard this story, but Charlie Jones wrote a book about this. But Charlie was an NBC broadcaster for decades. You might remember him if you're of a certain age. He was pretty much an NFL guy, football guy. But when the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta came along, it was all hands on deck at NBC, and the entire sports department, just gets an Olympic assignment. And Charlie, looking forward to the Olympics, but when his assignment comes, it's rowing, he's disappointed. The rowing events were far from the Olympic Village, so he had to commute. Um, the events were broadcast, really early in the morning, so his audience was going to be small. And if you're a broadcaster, you kind of want a bigger audience, and Charlie didn't know the first thing about rowing. But he dove in, he tackled the assignment with professionalism, and what he didn't know was that the experience was going to profoundly change his outlook. Um, he'd go into the interviews with the athletes and he'd ask questions about the wind or the rain or the lane assignments and how they would impact, performance. And every athlete, no matter what country, said the same thing to his questions. They all answer, "That's outside my boat." How do you think the wind will impact you? That's outside my boat. So what this means is, why should I worry about that if it's beyond my control? Why should I worry if it's outside my boat? And this was baked into the culture of these athletes. You block out a lot of distractions when you focus on what's in your control, and in that way, you gain control. And for me, in my life, the outside my boat mindset, it takes a lot of effort, but when I employ it, and I try to employ that at work, at home, on the mountain, I become more focused and more effective. For Charlie, the exposure to this mindset not only changed how we looked at sport, but how we looked at life. And I think we can all learn, similar lessons. So I'm going to leave off there. As a last thought, perform a little magic trick and distill everything down to a single idea. It's a summary of a few main themes from tonight in just 13 words, a few of the ideas. So here's my magic trick. To play a wrong note is insignificant. Play without passion is inexcusable. For me, a good place to end as we all head into the season. We're not going to be perfect, but when we bring our passion to the game, we grow, we flourish, and so do those around us. So I'm deeply humbled by the fact that you all took the time out of your busy day to listen to little Philip Schwartz from Peekskill, New York, who grew up skiing on $2 lift tickets. So thank you, everybody.